The great expanse of space has long been a marvel, a breathtaking destination reserved for the privileged few with deep pockets. But for the military, it represents a new and potentially dangerous battlefield, and nations are already flexing their muscles in this high-stakes game of domination. The race for supremacy in space is heating up as the United States, Russia, and China continually up the ante with their impressive displays of technological might. Now, surely you must have figured that guns in this case aren't the traditional rifles or magnums or snipers or all of those. These are more, well, ski-fi. And now word on Space Street is that the Space Force may soon be unveiling the biggest gun of all. Let's take a look, starting with what really is the Space Force. The United States Space Force, or USIF, is a department of the armed forces tasked with handling basically everything that has to do with space in the United States. They existed as the Air Force Space Command under the U.S. Army from 1982 to 2019, before the then U.S. President, Donald Trump, made them an independent uniformed service like, say, the Air Force. The Space Force was officially founded in December 2019, with the U.S. realizing and acknowledging just how much of a vantage point space would be in modern wars. Hopefully, we never find out in practice. Hopefully. On paper, however, space is a military goldmine if utilized to the max. According to Wikipedia, the Space Force remains the smallest armed service in the U.S., with 6,434 personnel supported by 77 spacecraft. This pales in comparison to the Air Force's 5,000-plus manned aircraft, 406 intercontinental ballistic missiles, and over 650,000 personnel and civilians. Now remember, the U.S. spends far more on the armed forces than any other country in the world. So even though the Space Force is relatively small, they're still backed by the most advanced tech equipment and billions of dollars. Defense News reported a $2 billion launch estimate of the Space Force, with costs likely to rack up to $13 billion by 2024. The personnel count is also expected to rise to 15,000 within this period. These dollar teachings go to managing and maintaining multiple systems, including the GPS, military, satellite communications, missile warning systems, space surveillance network, and satellite control network. There's also the Boeing X-37B, reusable robotic spacecraft under their care. As a bonus, here's a fun fact for you. The global space economy is expected to more than double from the current $450 billion to $1 trillion within the next 2 decades. March 2020 saw the first official launch of the Space Force, which was a military communications satellite lifted by United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket. Ends in 2021. The Guardians. That's what Space Force members are called. Since it's technically responsive launch to satellite, it can attack or L2 into low Earth orbit. This was its first tactically responsive launch mission, and a real glimpse into what they're all about to make the U.S. more agile and dynamic in response to events in not only deep space, but also just a few miles above the Earth. And the sheer existence of the Space Force may be the United States' response to the war of satellites that seems to be brewing, particularly with China and Russia. War of satellites. China launched an experimental satellite in 2013. How do we know it's an experiment? Well, the satellite was named Qian, meaning experiment. The Qian was seen moving close to a smaller satellite and shadowing it for a while. E.g., I was the company keeping an eye on this Qian activity, and they were stunned when the smaller satellite kept on disappearing and reappearing on their radars. Now, these radars are mighty powerful and were most likely not glitchy, and they later figured that what was really happening was that Qian had a grappling arms which were used to repeatedly pluck the smaller satellite out of orbit and then return it. The Chinese government attested to this, but claimed it was only for research purposes and handling debris in space. However, it's impossible for any major government to be comfortable with these capabilities because despite what the Chinese government says, the fact remains that they have a satellite in the works that could navigate to other satellites and pluck them out of space. Russia, on the other hand, has the Kamikaze, and the Kamikaze, known officially as Cosmos 2499, has maneuvering abilities like never seen before. This satellite is able to get close enough to other satellites and disable or destroy them. Kamikaze was launched in 2014, and the US monitored it initially as a piece of debris, only for it to come to life and get awfully close to other satellites. Understandably, the US was disturbed by this because these satellites can move at speeds of up to 17,500 miles per hour. So for Kamikaze to be able to maneuver close enough to other satellites to gather data, there must be some intent behind the capability. And sure enough, 3 years later, in 2017, Russia launched another satellite that vomited a smaller satellite. This smaller satellite then launched a projectile. Clearly, this has potential use in battles, and the United States knew it. Russia wasn't done, though. 2 years later, in 2019, they launched the Nesting Doll, a satellite that combines the two main capabilities of the previous two launches. That is, this new satellite could maneuver close to satellites in orbit, spy on them, vomit a smaller satellite within, and then shoot a projectile. The Nesting Doll then got so close to a US satellite that official complaints had to be made to Russia. It's no wonder that the Space Force was born at the end of that year. If the US relies so much on satellites to keep things running smoothly, as of today, they have 1897 satellites. China is second with 412, and Russia comes in third with 176 satellites. These satellites are used in monitoring threats on land, air, sea navigation, reconnaissance, communications, missile detection, missile guidance, basically everything. Satellites are important but unprotected in space. Pentagon requested $304 million in 2020 budget for space weaponry, and mainly tested directed energy weapons like lasers. US military tested first operational laser in Persian Gulf with great success. More tests ongoing to develop laser weapons to damage satellites from ground or fighter jets. Air Force has $155 million high-energy laser program with 3 components: laser advancements, street control system, and development container by Boeing. The Space Force, the smallest U.S. armed service, aims to dominate the new and dangerous battlefield of space. Its costly systems include a reusable spacecraft, and it may soon unveil a new weapon.